So, see if I can find my agenda. Okay, so it is 8:32. I think we can get started. It looks like we have everybody, virtually everybody here. So, is there anybody from the public to make a comment? Does not appear so. So we'll move on. So we added another agency at the last executive board meeting. So welcome, Grace. Welcome, OWS. So I'm sure that Grace knows many of you here, but we'll be doing attendance. And so if you could just, when I say your name, if you could just say your name, your title, and the agency that you're with. Okay, so Ram.
Hi, Ram, Office of Higher Education, CFO.
Bob Berry.
Hi, Bob Berry, DAS BITS manager of the database team.
Joe Campbell.
Sure. Joe Campbell, educational technology consultant, Connecticut Technical Education and Career System.
Patrick Flaherty.
Patrick Flaherty, Director of Research, Connecticut Department of Labor. We're the state's labor market information shop. We are also the data integration hub for P20 Win.
Lali Garcia. Is she here?
Eulalia Garcia, Department of Correction, District Administrator.
Scott Gall.
All right. Scott Gall, Chief Data Officer, Office of Policy and Management. Katie, are we recording yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry.
Michael Girolamo. Ajit Gopalakrishnan.
Hi, Ajit Gopalakrishnan, Chief Performance Officer, Connecticut State Department of Education.
Lauren Jorgensen.
Morning, Lauren Jorgensen, Director of Institutional Research at UConn.
Rose Kelly.
Rose Kelly, Interim Director, HMIS Management and Strategic Analysis for CCEH.
Jan Keeney.
Hi, Senior Associate at Connecticut State Colleges and Universities.
Eileen McMurray.
Eileen McMurray, Research and Communications at the Office of Early Childhood.
Fred North.
Fred North, Director for Data Reporting and Evaluation at Department of Children and Families.
Maura Preventure.
Morning, Maura Preventure, Vice President of Research with the Connecticut Conference of Independent Colleges.
Susan Smith.
Susan Smith, Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics, Department of Social Services.
Brian Sperry.
Morning, Brian Sperry, Deputy Director of Information Technology, Judicial Branch Court Support Services Division.
And Grace Sue.
Grace Sue, Chief of Staff, Office of Workforce Strategy.
Awesome. And we have a quorum. This is great. So the first item that we have on the agenda is policies and processes. And so we have many new faces. It's a new year. So the Data Governing Board is responsible for developing policies and processes for the operations of P20 Win. And so we've gone through a number of different policies in the last year. We are working on a data matching process document. We're still waiting on feedback, so we will not be moving forward on that at this meeting. But we will be going through a proposed pre-publication policy and process today. It would be great to get your feedback and from all of you, and then we'll put together something so that we can vote on it at the February meeting. And so I'm going to let Ashley run with this and go through the policy. And this was all, the policy and the process was included in your board packet that we shared last week.
All right, thanks, Katie. I'm going to share my screen just so everyone can see it in front of them. There we go. You should be able to see it. All right. So we have a policy document and a process document. I'm going to walk us through this and pretty much read the whole things, just so if people have any questions, Now's a great time to bring those up. We're hoping that in February's meeting, we'll be able to vote on this policy and process. So any revisions that you think may be necessary, it would be great to hear that feedback now. Of course, like Katie said, you do have these documents in your email from the one that she sent you last week. If there's any revisions needed, we will send that prior to the next meeting so that you'll have the most clean documents for that meeting next month. All right. So the pre-publication review policy, the policy purpose, the purpose of this policy is to outline the P20 pre-publication review process. The establishment of a pre-publication review policy and process will help ensure that data requesters can prepare adequately to release analyses of data, that agencies can make informed decisions for the release of data, and that data are in compliance with all applicable state laws, policies, and regulations throughout the P20 information lifecycle. So this policy and process is not only for you, but it's also for the data requesters, so that they can be preparing their dissemination materials, whatever that might be, PowerPoints, publications, dashboards, properly. Any questions on that so far? So the policy statement. To fulfill the mission of P20 to inform policy and practice, agencies must be able to ensure that data will be released in accordance with federal and state laws and not compromise the confidentiality of those whose data it represents. Publication of data must not lead to the re-identification of individuals. In order to ensure this, the pre-publication review must involve people and process and involve legal and procedural measures to ensure data is being released responsibly. Data requesters also maintain intellectual freedom and the right to express their findings and conclusions as they fulfill the purpose of the research that was outlined in the approved data request, in line with the self-suppression guidelines, data labels, and confidential data disclosure in any materials being assessed for release. To set clear expectations, P20 agencies will describe the critical components of suppression guidelines and data labeling for anyone requesting data. Requirements for data requesters will be communicated clearly and transparently to facilitate the request process. And this will include a review of any data analyses that a data requester would like to share with any party outside of the data sharing agreement. So we're really here talking about let's protect the people whose data it's representing. Let's make sure that everyone here is okay with the data being released, but let's also make sure that the data requester knows and is okay with the data being released. Any questions at all about this?
Ashley, perhaps I should submit this in an email, but
sure.
I appreciate that data requesters must maintain intellectual freedom.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we see something pre-publication that is, I was going to say a clear distortion, but I don't know if clear would apply to everybody, that raises questions about the interpretation of the data provided. What scope do we have for providing input on that prior to publication?
That will be laid out in the process document that I'm going to go over next.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I think we fully agree with you that like if there's something that is like completely distorting or like leading to wrong conclusions, that's problematic. But at the same time, and that feedback should be relayed to them. But at the same time, the data requesters, this is their data request, right? They have ownership of it. So they should be allowed to have that ownership and come to conclusions based on the data analyses that they're getting. This is really for transparency's sake, right? We don't want them also to feel like they're being stifled at all.
Agreed. I'm just thinking of times that I've been interviewed and then quoted in articles where the article was entirely the opposite of what I had said. So anyway, this is good. Thank you. Please continue. My apologies.
No, this is the place to ask these questions. Any other questions on this? The only other things in the policy document are like related documents. So that would be the pre-publication process, which is the next document we're going to go over, the EMOU, the data sharing agreements, because those reference the pre-publication process. So that is the extent of the policy document. And again, you guys have this, so feel free to take more time to look it over and provide feedback. So the pre-publication review. The purpose of this document or of this process is to document the steps for approval of dissemination materials that are created from the analyses of P21 requests. Participating agencies are to ensure that data are properly aggregated for release, data are labeled correctly, and that confidential data are not disclosed. So pretty much everything I just said in that previous document, just in a nice 1 to 2 sentences. Applicability. This process applies to OPM, all P21 participating agencies, and the data recipient, and the components will be incorporated into data sharing agreements. So we already have a little piece of the data sharing agreement that talks about this. So I think there's a little bit of language in there. Definitions. A lot of these definitions are in other documents, so I'm going to skip over some of them just because you guys are familiar with them and have approved them in other documents. I'll go over the ones that are new and noteworthy. So analytical data, that should be old, but right, it's just the data that's being sent to the data requesters to analyze. Cell suppression size, so that's the minimum number that is allowed to be showed in any dissemination materials. This number will be defined in the DSA. That number changes based on what agencies are involved in a data request, so that's why we're referring to the DSA here. Some agencies have different rules that allow them to suppress cells at different sizes. Data recipient, right? This is the old person getting the data. Data sharing, right? This is just the act of data sharing. Dissemination materials, this one's new. It's any documents, dashboards, presentations, data visualizations, or other products that a data requester creates from P21 data. Yeah, Fred.
Yeah, I think on dissemination materials, probably should add the phrase you used above, I think, and intends to distribute beyond people in the DSA.
Okay. Yeah,
right.
That's great.
That's what makes it a dissemination material, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's easy edits. Thanks, Fred. Participating agencies, that's all of you guys. PII, we again have this in other documents, so that's just data that's personally identifiable. And that's for our definitions. Implementation. Or let me pause here. Is there any questions on definitions at all besides for the one that Fred raised?
I do. This is Jan, real quick. So there's a distinction between confidential information and PII for education records. It's kind of important. This will probably come through in CCU's response to, that we're putting together for the main DSA, but it might need to be reflected here as well, because legally confidential information under Connecticut law is a much more limiting list of identifiers compared to what PII is. So there might need to be some tweaking here, and we can just so you know.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that offline there, because it sounds like it's, has bigger implications than just this document.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions on definitions while we're here? Okay.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I noticed down below we referenced the operating group a number of places, but we don't have a definition for that. Might want to have that in there.
We can do that. That's
easy.
Okay. So implementation. This is just saying the following steps describe the process to be used for approval of dissemination materials upon analyses of an executed DSA through P21. The standard process is designed to cover most scenarios, but agencies can agree to variations or modifications to this process on a case-by-case basis if documents in the DSA and the associated attachments. So this first part here is a really good example of what might be outside of the standard process that could be requested. So this is an optional preliminary review. This can be opted into by either you guys or the data requester if people want the ability to review things more in depth for a longer period of time. That option is there. This actually is already in our legal documents, or not so spelled out, but just notes that people can request this. So if a participating agency that contributed data wish for a prior review of any findings or dissemination materials, a written request must be made to the data recipient and operating group over email. The terms of sharing these materials will be determined by the data recipient and the participating agency, with the operating group documenting and ensuring that these terms are met by both parties. These prior reviews will be handled individually based on the nature of the request and interests of all involved parties. These prior reviews will happen in addition to the pre-publication review process as outlined below. So this is essentially saying this is separate than the actual official process below. We'll, make terms as need be. So this would be something like, imagine a publication is coming to you during like a legislative session and you're saying, 10 days isn't enough for me. I need 30 days. I need more time. I need at least 20 additional days prior. This would be a really good example of like, I want to start this process. On the flip side, if the data recipient would like additional time, so if the data recipient would like the dissemination materials reviewed prior to the pre-publication review process, they are allowed to request that one of the operating group and participating agencies that contributed data. The exchange of these dissemination materials must happen over encrypted email, which will be the same in the below process, which is set up by the operating group. The operating group will set up a secure email chain with encryption, and that prevents forwarding of the email contents. There is no timeline for these informal reviews. These reviews occur in addition to the pre-publication review process as outlined below. Is there any questions about these sort of optional preliminary reviews that could be, again, initiated by participating agency or data requester?
There's a lot here. I appreciate, first of all, I think the review prior to release is super important. So I'm glad we're working on a policy. The process builds in OPM into being a sort of a joining a midpoint in between all of these things, both for the pre-review and the optional preliminary review and the pre-publication review. And that's new, at least to the processes that CSU has been involved with in the past. And so I think there's just a lot I need to, while I appreciate this run through now, and I might stand by and be like, yes, I understand what's in this document, there's still a review that needs to be done on our side with, in conjunction with the DSA, in conjunction with our security and legal folks about what that implication means to have CSU's data go through another entity, whether it's OPM or it's Yale or Quinnipiac or whoever would be serving in the purpose of doing that funneling in this process, it's OPM, what the implication is for the agreements in terms of having our data go through that other touch point. So I just want to flag that as something that we'll need to think more deeply about. But I do appreciate this run through and thinking along these lines. Thank you.
Any other? I see it. And Jay, you have your hand up again.
No, I'm trying to turn it down.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions before we jump into the actual process? I know we've been leading up to it. All right, let's see what this is all about then. So the required pre-publication process. So the data recipient must inform the operating group at least 5 days prior to their ability to share that they have dissemination materials that are prepared to undergo the pre-publication review process with the operating group and the participating agencies that contribute data. That 5 days is really for us to be able to ensure that all of you guys are prepared to get it in the near future. Also set up secure email. It gives us enough time to really make sure that everything goes smoothly once they are sent over. So step 2, the operating group creates an encrypted email chain in which the data recipient can reply with the dissemination materials. So we've tried this encrypted email chain with a couple of recent studies that have been done, recent projects that have been done, and it works really well. It prevents the data from being forwarded. So if something isn't aggregated, right, not that we run into that very often, but in case it wouldn't get sent out to a wider audience. The operating group does an initial review of the materials within 3 business days of receiving to ensure that the cell suppression size outlined in the DSA is being followed through the dissemination materials. If there are any violations of the cell suppression size, The operating group informs the data recipient that it must be revised if there are uncertainties, if the cell suppression size is being followed. So for example, if numbers are represented in a small percentage, but you don't know what that percentage number is actually underlying N for it, the operating group informs the data recipient that it must be revised to provide more detail and clarity, such as adding a footnote. The 10 business day timer, which is what's in our DSA right now for pre-publication review, starts once revised dissemination materials are securely sent back to the operating group for review, or once the operating group notifies the data recipient that their initial review did not uncover any need for revisions. The operating group approves the dissemination materials we shared with the participating agencies who shared data. I'm going to pause there because that was a big one. Is there any questions? All right, I'm going to push forward. Step 4, the operating group creates an encrypted email chain and securely sends the dissemination materials to the appropriate recipients of the participating agencies that contributed data, data governing board members, and any data stewards identified by the data governing board members. These materials should not be shared with anyone outside the original recipients of the secure email. It's also virtually impossible with that secure email. The operating group communicates the deadline for review of the materials. Step 5, the appropriate recipients at the participating agency, so again, the data governing board members or data stewards, I should say, that contributed data review the dissemination materials. Approval of the dissemination materials or any feedback, questions, or concerns should be provided in writing to the operating group by the specified deadline for review. The review should be of the following nature, and this is what's already in our DSA. This is what you guys should be reviewing for when you get dissemination materials on your screen. Cell suppression size, that ensure that the size that is outlined in the DSA is being met. Data labels, ensure that data is correctly labeled. This also includes ensuring that the labels describing the source of the data are accurate. So for example, that results involving a specific program accurately describe what that program is, who it serves, how services are provided, etc. And then confidential data disclosure, ensure that there's nothing in the dissemination materials that causes concern for privacy. I'll pause here. Are there any questions about what you guys have to review for?
Actually, I'm just going to interject because Jeet put a similar comment to what Eileen raised earlier in the chat. And I think this is where, like, there really is a tricky issue about kind of providing feedback on the interpretations or the conclusions of a study versus the standard of review here, which is lower, but it gets at some of those things like the labeling. If somebody misinterprets something, I think that if it's sort of the way it's described, like I think that that's consistent with labeling. But it doesn't go to the level of, you know, like I think you got it wrong, like this you didn't analyze this issue correctly or use the wrong methods or something else. So that's the standard review here, like Ashley's saying, is fairly minimal to preserve some of the independence for the data users, but it does get at some of those questions. But I think this is the area that's sort of tricky to lay out in a way that gives the requesters kind of what they're looking for, but the agency's enough of a stake that they can provide feedback at different points. Or chat it back. So anyway, but this, I think, anticipate if there's something that's off here, also if there's wording or something you want to see to change to clarify it, then that's helpful.
And I think this next step, step 6, really gets into like you can provide that additional feedback. So let me read that real quick, and then if people have comments, feel free. The appropriate recipients of the participating agencies that contribute data may also review additional content in the dissemination materials. So for example, here, feedback on the methodology, any conclusions being made, limitations, etc. And right, those are just a few. Any feedback, questions, or concerns should be communicated with the operating group by the specified deadline. And then the operating group will supply that feedback to the data recipient. But again, because it's outside of that normal scope of review that's already in the DSA, they are not required to address it. I will say that most of our data recipients are very, like they're good. They want that feedback. They want to make sure that everyone's okay and they take it very seriously. Yeah, Ajit.
Yeah, my only thought is I like number 6. My only thought is perhaps we can add a phrase in the policy statement, just saying that, you know, while data requesters must maintain freedom and the right to express their, their findings and conclusions, that DGB can review and provide feedback. That way it's clear in that policy statement that this number 6 exists.
Yeah, no, that's easy enough to do.
I like that because it sets the tone right up front.
Okay, and then last step, we're almost there. The operating group communicates the approvals of the dissemination materials and/or any feedback, questions, or comments with the data recipient if substantial revisions are necessary to ensure that self-suppression size, data labels, and confidential data disclosure are being met. The pre-publication review process may be restarted upon request by any party to the data sharing agreement. So this gives you a little freedom here that if you're like uncomfortable with the state of the dissemination materials based on the things that need to be reviewed for, you can request that we do this all over again with revised materials. Any other?
Good. I have a question, kind of maybe on number 6 and number 7. 6 reads that right, review, such as like feedback on methodology. What if there's, and I know we were talking about sort of the freedom and right to express our findings. And I think this gets to Ajit's comment in the chat about the faulty interpretations. If we notice sort of a material misuse or sort of incorrect linkage or interpretation of the data, this seems to lack any recourse in that area. Is that intentional, or
I would say, sorry, Brian, I would say also in the data request form. So, right, that thing that you guys have to review to even get a data sharing agreement moving. We do ask requesters to like talk about what methodology they're going to use. So like a lot of this stuff is upfront too, which is why I think we're trying to protect them at the back end. So like, right, if methodology, if you're like, oh wait, this regression model is not showing results that I'm super happy with, that's what was laid out up front. And like, again, we want to like not stifle them in their findings. So I think that's part of it too, is like, this is the whole process of P20 win kind of comes into play here with that as well. I don't know if that helps clarify, or.
I think maybe, I've encountered a couple of scenarios in previous multi-agency, data projects where, the results of the, sort of the core analytic data set that was produced based on using the data sets from the varying agencies resulted in, either a massive amount of bloat or miscounts or, incorrect, not even incorrect findings, but just an incorrect, leading to an incorrect analytics data set. And at that point, it took a good amount of work and review to be able to help, their analysts, just kind of get the data set into the correct shape for analysis. And I'm just looking at this and wondering if there's, I can't imagine a scenario where those researchers or requesters wouldn't want to hear from us about something like that. But this does seem to lack any teeth in that
area. Yeah. I'm gonna stop sharing just because that is the end of the documents. I'm frozen. I don't know if I look frozen to you guys, but hopefully I'm not. I think, again, we've received a lot of really great feedback here. And I think that if you guys have if this, part of the process is not sitting right, again, you guys have a say in this, you have a voice in this. So please provide us like that feedback if there's something that you think would be a better way to state it, or to include something or not include something. That is what this conversation is about. So any feedback that you can give us, we really do appreciate it. And yeah, please take these documents now that we've gone over them, review them, mark them up, and we're happy to incorporate any feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jan, I see your hand. Jan, I think you're muted.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. I had an idea based on that. This particular document is relevant to this group, right? It doesn't really include the data requester as in that role. I mean, any agency can be a data requester, but in terms of that role, this is really about the participating agencies more so. So if there is to be sort of teeth in terms of like Ajit was saying, well, they're never going to get data again, that might be something that should go into the DSA, just as an idea. But separate from that, I had a question. On number 4, it talks about the deadline. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. So number 3 says there's a 10-day timer. 4 says operating group sets the deadline. Is it 10 days or is it?
It's at 10 days, yeah. So
10
it's
days.
we would
Okay.
communicate,
Okay.
and that's what's in the DSA right now is 10 days.
Okay.
So.
And so I also just want to more materially understand the difference between the prior optional review and the pre-publication review. Is the main difference that the one is mandatory required and the other one is optional? Is there
Yep.
anything else different about that? The pre one gives you more time potentially. So if you know you're gonna need more 10 days, then get that email in right away and say, hey, we're gonna need 3 weeks or something.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So it's really just optional versus non-optional. With
Mhm.
everything still being coordinated through OPM setting the secure email. So can you describe how that works? I was like,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't know you could even do that. It'd be helpful to understand.
And I think actually if Bob's still on the call, Bob might be helpful in this conversation because it is something that we use through bits. But it just prevents forwarding. It gives encryption on the emails, and just provides more security. And it's pretty easy to set up on our end. It can go to internal and external state emails. So Jan, I know you don't have a ct.gov email, but you could easily get a secure email as well. Bob, I don't know if you want to get more technical or if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, you did perfect. You did perfect. Better than I would have done. So nice job.
Well, how does it get set up? I mean, can any agent, because I'm thinking just, how do you set it up?
It should be automatically. I know, excuse me, I know mine's automatically. I didn't do anything to set it up. So let me just see if I can.
So it's just a matter of selecting the encrypt message within your Microsoft email. Like you're in the email and you go and you click encrypt and that sets it up. I'm just wondering how it makes it a chain, how you then loop in people from. Is it just anybody then on that email then can't forward it on?
Yeah, so you can't loop people in then. So it's the original recipients of that email.
So we just need to check, I suppose, to make sure that those agencies, whatever their Microsoft Senate, maybe it's the same for all the executive agencies are on the same Microsoft tenants that they know they're all set up the same. I'm not quite sure if we're set up the same or if anybody outside, like if it's involved somebody from an agency, a consulting firm like Cross Sector Consulting's done a lot of P20 work, if they would have the same sort of controls set. Anyway, it might be something to think about, but okay, thank you for that explanation, unless there's more to know.
I think, again, it doesn't matter if you're in state, out of state. If you're out of state, you'll get like an email that says like, go to this link and click on this and log in and you'll receive the documents. And that works for any, like I've sent it to my personal email just to test it out, which is not associated with anything. So, consultant, CSCUs, anyone would get it.
In terms of receiving, I guess I'm thinking about the setup as well, because if the setup has to go through one agency, then everything has to go to that agency first before it gets distributed. And that creates that movement of all the data through that point. And it might be that having the agency who has the information simply sets it themselves, possibly. Anyway, just things that I'm thinking about. Thanks for the explanation. I really appreciate it.
Can I add, that is the case what you're describing. So OPM is the agency that'll coordinate it in the process that's laid out there. And it's for 2 reasons. One that's just kind of technical and one that I think is more substantive. One is the technical one, it's just you need somebody to initiate the email chain, whether it's cross-sector, state agencies, or whoever's involved in it. And so any state agency can, but we would do that in this case. And so you just need somebody to kick it off with a ct.gov account that's covered by the policies that Bob is describing, so that we don't have to worry about configuration for anyone else as long as it's initiated from a state account. That means it's always consistent. We're sort of doing it the same way. That's just the sort of technical reason. I think the more important one is so that we can maintain sort of like clear line of custody from the data sharing agreements through the release of data through all of the data products, and we understand so that this is actually these tables, this report, these files, these PowerPoint presentations. This is what was shared for release, so that if something else comes out later, somebody has a question, we know like this is exactly what was shared for release. This is exactly what was approved for that, and that's sort of the more substantive reason for having that coordination through OPM. And I know we've talked sort of about that separately, but I think that's kind of important. We had a question come up. I know Jeet dropped off, but a question that he had raised about a kind of a data product they saw being circulated. And so that enables us to go back and be like, yes, this is actually like, directly from the same packet that the agencies release, so that we know exactly what's in the request, what's in the data sharing agreement, what gets released, and then, what gets shared for dissemination, that chain of custody is pretty consistent. That's sort of, I think, is a more substantive reason for that coordination.
We have other things on the agenda, and I really appreciate all your feedback here. Oh, Eileen, sorry, I didn't even see your hand. Go ahead.
That's okay. I didn't jump in this time. I raised my hand. So I really appreciate the discussion of that, because that was a note that I had written about any requirement to see the finished product, because once things are out, they take on a life of their own. And it would be good for us as participating agencies, but also as a data governing board, to see what is being expressed that represents state agency data, because we know that garners responses. And so it would be important for, I think, us to know what has been said in what forum, and to be able to be ready to inform our commissioners and others about how that may have happened and which data it was based upon if we were contributing agency for data. So thank you for building that in. It's super important.
Thanks, Eileen. So again, you guys have all this. Please send us feedback. The feedback we've received here is super helpful. But if there's no other burning questions, I'm going to give the meeting back to Katie, because I know there's other things on the agenda.
Cool, thanks. This was great, everyone. So I took notes. We'll pull together that feedback. If you all could get us feedback, so you have the documents, they were shared with you in the board packet last week. If you have any additional feedback, suggested language, if you could get that to us by next Friday, the 19th, so that we can pull together a document to share with you all, so that we can move towards approving this policy at the February meeting. And again, this is a policy so that P20 WIN can better function, so that we can be more responsive to our participating agencies. There are 15 of us now. And so we want to make sure that we are working as effectively and as efficiently as possible. So thank you all for your feedback on this. So the next item on the agenda is data security updates. So in past meetings, we've shared that we've partnered with DISC, the Data Integration Support Center, on our security and other pieces. So I'm gonna let Coral give an update on that project.
Great. Yeah, so as Katie mentioned, we're partnering with DISC to explore kind of data modernization efforts for the P21 system. The first step of this is DISC is going to coordinate a privacy and security assessment with Security Compliance Associates, or SCA. We've mentioned this assessment in the past. It's going to take place at the very end of this month, the very last week of this month. And part of this assessment is going to be interviewing the agencies that are directly responsible for the security and privacy of data as it moves through what is currently the P20 system. So those agencies are BITS as the state IT agency, DOL as the data integration hub, and OPM as the operating group. So those are going to be the key 3 agencies interviewed by SCA during that week. As part of this, there's going to be a kickoff meeting, and that's going to be next Friday at noon. We are going to invite and send an invite out to all the data governing board members. However, this specific meeting is focusing on that SCA aspect of the week. And so it's going to just focus mostly on BITS, DOL, and OPM, and explaining kind of what their role in this kind of process over the next week is going to be. So you are more than welcome to attend and sit in if you would like to learn more about what's going to happen with SCA and DISC as they complete those interviews. DISC themselves might be reaching out to some of you to set up other interviews that are separate from what SCA is going to be doing during that site visit. We mentioned in the past, if you would like to meet with DISC, let us know and we'll pass it along to them. I think we'll be finalizing kind of what those meetings will be and who they'll be meeting with next week. So we'll schedule those hopefully next week. Are there any questions? Great.
Is just a comment. I always find external entity reviews to be incredibly helpful, even if they are sometimes painful. So I appreciate your your positive presentation of this reality, but I'm thinking back to Part C Federal Office of Special Education Programs visit during one of those October storms where we had no power and we had to keep rescheduling. So it was painful in multiple ways, but the feedback that we received was incredibly actionable. So looking forward to hearing the outcomes from next week's visit. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. We will definitely keep everybody updated on this. We are hopeful that it will be good. So the next item on the agenda is the Department of Ed site visit. So everybody should have received a calendar invite for February 13th for an in-person meeting with USDOE to provide feedback or answer questions for them about the expansion, your experience with the 2019 SLDS grant, which is what allowed us to expand to 15 agencies. So it'll be a good opportunity to really engage with this. There will be additional meetings that day focusing on data use, deliverables, and security. So you may receive additional invitations that day to participate in those sessions. So, so we will follow up with all of you on that. Let's see, do any of you have questions or concerns or comments about the site visit?
It's located OPM's 450 Capitol.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
We'll send out directions again. I think it might not have actually gotten to folks. But we'll send those out again. Okay. Anything else on the site visit? Okay, cool. So the next item is the learning agenda. Okay, so in December, we had a learning session where many of you participated in a facilitated workshop to discuss your agency missions and questions that you have that are pertinent to data use and your policies. So we brought the feedback that we got from that learning session to the executive board on December 19th. And I have a new computer, and so apparently PowerPoint does not exist anymore on my computer, so I cannot share the screen. But we have, from that conversation, we narrowed, or we actually expanded the learning agenda from 5 categories to 7 that look at families, children and community, physical and behavioral health, higher education, workforce development, early and K-12 education, justice, incarceration and reintegration, and housing security. So we are going to have a part 2 of that workshop next Friday at the same time, 8:30, our regular learning session time to really take a deeper dive into questions that you have for your agencies that require data from other agencies. And so it would be great if you could all make it some time to participate in that. The plan is to take the feedback, the categories, the new questions to the executive board at the March meeting and have them vote to approve that learning agenda and also add their own questions to it. So a lot of work, hoping we can update it. Again, we want to make sure that this learning agenda reflects all of the participating agencies that we have at this point. Are there any questions about that? If you don't have the invite on your calendar, please let me know and I will send it to you. Okay. So the next item is the communications plan. So this is another topic that was brought up at the executive board meeting where we discussed expanding the scope and vision for P20 WIN. Now that we have 15 agencies, the last time we really did anything with it, we only had like 6 to 10. And so it's time to expand on this. So we will be developing a scope of work for a consultant who will help us with a communications plan to better communicate what P20 WIN does and just get more visibility for the work that we are doing. Scott, do you have anything to add on that?
No, not a ton. I think, again, we know a lot of people are not, some of you are in the executive board meetings, but not everybody is. And so we're going to have some kind of information sharing between them. I think there was, we brought the topic up. It's come up through several different individual conversations in different ways. We raised the topic, and I think there was sort of general interest in making sure we had sort of a communication strategy put in place and a look at the presence for P20 WIN. And so that is what we will do sometime in the next few months. And again, because the meetings don't have perfect overlap, but there's thoughts that you have as data governing board members, and particularly most of you, I think, have been involved for longer or maybe in more depth than the executive board members. Then if there's feedback or thoughts you have on it, we'd welcome them here kind of offline.
Cool. All right. So then, if there are no questions on that, then we'll move on to the next item, which is grant updates. So for the 2019 SLDS grant update, we're having the site visit. We're in the final year for this grant. So we'll be doing some wrap up on that. We received the 2023 SLDS grant, which is focusing on developing a research collaborative and really expanding our connections with researchers. So we're working on the project plan for that. So we'll have more updates and opportunities for you guys to get involved in the coming months. The WDQI grant that DOL was awarded has 2 focuses. One is creating a secure data enclave, which is where our partnership with DISC comes into play, but also the OWS program outcomes and career pathways data request will be moving forward. We anticipate this will be shared with the participating agencies later this afternoon, and so we're ready to run with this. So that's really exciting. And then the Institute of Education Sciences grant that was awarded to the Office of Higher Ed is going to be evaluating the Roberta Willis scholarship program. And so that we should be circulating with participating agencies next week. So we have a lot of movement. I know that we have some time. We have a lot of other data requests that are in action right now. We have many that are in development. We have a few that are ready to have data sharing agreements signed. And so hopefully at the next meeting, we can give you a more deeper presentation on the data requests that are moving through. I know that we don't have much opportunity to discuss those, and so we will do that more this year. And with that, is there any other business questions, comments, musings about the universe? Okay, I'm going to take silence as a no. So it's 9:22. Our meeting is over. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. I'm sure you'll hear from all of us soon.
You too, Katie. Take it easy.
Thank you so much. This
Have
was
a
really
good night.
substantive. Appreciate it. Take care,
Thank you
everyone.
all. Bye.
Thank you.